Hello everyone, it's Chris Kobe again. I want to make a follow-up video to my Magnus Movement Speed build video because somebody who watched that one asked if I could, and I thought it was a great idea because it'll elaborate more on how the actual build works. Like you kind of see it developing over the process of a game. The person who recommended was Caniso, so thanks for the great recommendation. That's why I invite you guys to comment too. Maybe sometimes you may be able to suggest an idea that I hadn't thought of. So please keep commenting. If you appreciate the videos, keep hitting the thumbs up. If my biggest problem with whenever I've got into a video game is that I'm not really consistent with it, but I'm trying to be already super consistent with it. If you guys noticed, the last day I released the previous video was about like 2 to 3 days. I already have great ideas for the next coming up video. So just remember to comment, and one of your comments may spark an idea for me to make the next future video. As far as this video goes, I made it in ×2 speed just to get through it a little bit quicker because the actual gameplay was 18 minutes and I want to keep the videos around 10 to 12 minutes. So without further ado, let's get into this one. So just like I had mentioned before, we have just one person starting with us at hospital. Like I said, that's about as many as you'll get. One thing that I wanted to pay attention to as well is there were 3 people starting in tempo. So when you're looking at the map, don't just kind of be AFK. Pay attention to stuff like that because it's going to come very helpful later to notice where there's a zone where a bunch of people went, especially if you're going to be going to that zone. Because if you're trying to look for something in a zone that was extremely populated from the start, you're most likely not going to find anything there. As I already mentioned, one of the most convenient things about this build was that you hardly get any contention in your first 2 zones. Here, we're lucky enough to get a couple first aids going. I do apologize about the ranking down at the bottom. That just shows, like, I like to show that kind of stuff, not to be like a show off, but to show like my validation of like, hey, this is legit. This is how high ranked I am. So that's kind of why I put that stuff on there. So it kind of blocks the last row of items that we have. It blocks our build, but our build this time, at least for those 3 slots, ended up being the same. There was no variance that we got like mithril boots or anything like that. Everything so far is running pretty smooth. We even dropped one of the alcohol just because we're done making the first aids. Here we're kind of just having a little bit of a struggle though finding some oil. So even though when we're delayed, it's already close to end of day 1, and we're not doing extremely terrible just because in the first zone, since we weren't really contested for the feathers, that helped to speed the rest of the problems. This is one of the slides that I showed in the previous video where you have to remove your rod and get everything together. We pick up the branches to upgrade our vest all the way to a blue one. I think we killed a dog for the leather here. Yes, we ended up doing that as well. So as far as the leather, sometimes that's one of the biggest things that like sets me back a little bit. But we got a bit lucky with nobody having killed a dog just yet, and I think the chickens weren't killed in hospital either. So if you're struggling to find some leather, obviously when you kill the bears, you'll get some as well. Here, pretty standard again. I don't think anybody really messes with me anytime soon. And even though there were 3 people starting a temple, like I mentioned before, we actually get really lucky in particular with this chest to find 2 of the items. And here at this point, I start clicking towards the bear because I think it's a good time to just start killing it, even though we don't have all of our items from here. We almost get taken out by this eye here. We have to use our R to get away. So that's one of the things that I wanted to highlight even in the previous video, but like I said, I wanted to keep it kind of short, is what's so nice about Magnus, as most people know, is that he has his bike where he can get away from people. And even with this build, there's certain times where I've killed somebody and I've needed to use my ultimate to finish that person off. Just the fact that you have a ton of movement speed allows you to run away before you get third party with someone. And it's a complete like valuable strategy to just like obviously not get killed when you just took a fight and you may be low on water, may be low on SP. Here we're running down the heart, and a lot of the times I don't have problems with running away from people as far as like in the final circle that I need, like that I can't use a bunch of my red zone time just to chase somebody down. We're left with literally like 6 seconds, but in the back of my mind I'm like, I know I'm guaranteed to get this kill because the heart had no SP. So I was like, I don't care if I use a lot of my red zone time. I need to get this kill to kind of start getting a little bit ahead. Not that we fell too much behind, but we also want to push our lead since we were doing really well with grabbing even the mithril. We want to push that lead and get something from having grabbed the mithril, and there we got that kill. Obviously, even though we build a mithril helmet afterwards, it's still a huge bonus to get like just be able to speed up our weapon level that early. I apologize if the commentary is in top tier, but I'm kind of trying to do it off of memory of what happened. So some of the details I won't be remembering as much. But here we run into the high gen, and we can just like chase her down because we see that we're so far ahead of her. Sometimes the beauty of this build again is just that moving speed. I'm repeated a couple times here and there, but like if you go and engage on somebody and you see that you're losing the trade, a lot of the times you'll be able to run into them, take that trade, see that it's not a favorable trade, and because you have so much movement speed, you can just kind of get away from them. So that's exactly what ended up happening versus that high gen. I went, took a trade with her. She we saw that we were a whole lot stronger than her, so we just ended up killing her. There we grabbed the feather duster, and in a little bit we see that I'm going to check one of the chestings. Usually it's a good idea to check these chests because it might give you a task, and what I mean by task is like something to do. Here we still have like a first aid. We're pretty good on health, so I'm like pretty much almost like just hunting, but you don't just want to hunt like pretty much foolishly. You want to have something else backed up in case you don't run into somebody. You're at least making yourself stronger. So we end up running into that blood sample, which then allows us to make the Chinese opera mask and improve our build even more. That's one of the few things that I actually don't. Um, it's not that I don't like it, but I think like if we find a mithril and we end up making our mithril helmet because that's our standard build that we want to go, but then we get the Chinese opera mask, it kind of like almost contradicts itself that we get two really good items for one slot. So sometimes what we like to do is just be able to hot swap them. So here, the Aya teleported right next to me. I thought I could push her against the wall. She was literally about like 2 pixels away from being stunned. She tries to push us back. We eventually just end up turning on her because I have no red and she's kind of cornering me there. Wickeline was around, but there was a heart and a Cecilia. I think the Cecilia ends up going to like final three with me. But the fact that both of them were around here, or even the heart itself, makes it really annoying to just for me be able to kill Wickeline. So I'm like, okay, if I want to kill the Wickeline, I have to get rid of this heart before we can kill the Wickeline. So here's what I'm talking about: where you take a bad trade and then you're like, okay, I'm kind of gonna reset the fight and then like chase her afterwards. And this is where the Cecilia comes in play, where I would have chased down the heart and it probably would have been like really close of like who ended up killing each other there. I had the HP lead, so most likely it would have been me, but you know, as long as you're dodging, that's one of the more skillful things too that you have to keep into consideration when you're playing Magnus. You have so much movement speed that a lot of his abilities don't require a lot of skill. So the skill that you have to put into making this champion better than what most people play him is being able to dodge. So the movement speed obviously helps with that. So in situations where you're up against a Hard or Cecilia, you gotta anticipate like their skill shots. As you see here, I dodged like two of her Qs to or Wilson's. I dodged her pull there, so she's not doing a lot of damage to me. So you kind of just have to like do juke moves, you know, to anticipating that they're gonna throw their skill shots, so that you can actually like outskill them and not just like stat check them. And it is a little bit of stat checking, but obviously when you're dodging quite a bit of their abilities, that's gonna help you get an edge in a fight as well. Now here we end up getting pretty lucky and finding some heated oil from the wolves. The Cecilia is kind of being really annoying and not letting me finish my fish and chips, so I'm just trying to get away from her so that I have enough time to be able to make them. So we're just trying to create some distance, go into the bush. You always want to do little things like this rather than trying to cook the fish and chips outside the bush. Go inside the bush, that way they won't be able to see you and be able to harass you and stop you from making them. It's also always a good idea to just be able to check where they're at. So I had mentioned before that I wanted to make a chart where I showed the worst matchup. So my idea here was to stay inside the bush and get a jump on the Cecilia. Since Cecilia is able to kite us out a lot, we kind of have to set up some sort of strategy where we can just get in her face, and having the bush where she just face checks us is a good idea to be able to do that. And we're also just resting a lot too. That way we're not using up our food, and we have that for the last fight. You guys see me hitting tab a lot. I'm just always checking to see where they're at, what weapon levels they have ahead of me, what items they have ahead of me, and seeing how I'm gonna be able to like win a fight. And here, I start to strategize how I'm gonna beat the Cecilia because, like I mentioned before, she's one of the worst matchups that we have, and on top of that, she has two gold items. So I'm like, okay, how am I gonna beat this Cecilia? And I'm like, okay, maybe if I just run to the corner, which you guys will see me do here shortly, you know, I could third party her because part of the reason that she's so hard is she has like a lot of kiting. She, you know, pushes Wilson behind us, so she does damage, and then she tries to pull us with Wilson. If she ends up doing that, she ends up doing a lot of damage. So here I noticed that she kills the Aya, and then I just jump on top of her like finish her off with the bike, and then we end up getting the kill.
Can anyone stop this body speed?
Thanks everybody for watching. I have posted my stream schedule here on the screen right now. Obviously the thing says Tuesday, but that already happened today. So my next stream will be tomorrow. I might be a little bit late just because I'm helping a friend do a couple tasks, but I will certainly still be streaming tomorrow within that time frame. So make sure you check in and be in the lookout for more videos. If you want to hit the subscribe button, you'll get the notification. Thanks. See you guys next time.